In this example, much like the last, we have information broken down not only year by year, but also quarter by quarter. So the first thing we want to establish is there a horizontal pattern or a linear trend, either upward or downwards? And we saw in the last video, we can't simply just create our time series plot with simply our quarters and our sales, as our quarters are listed 1, 2, 3, 4 constantly year by year. We need our time series plot to plot the most ancient data first and gradually, period by period, get to the most recent period of time. We found out last video we had to insert an extra column. And we said we could label it whatever we want. I choose to label it period. And I want this to go from my very first period all the way up to the most recent period, which in this case, if we have quarterly sales for 5 years, we have 20 different quarters or 20 periods of time that we'll be plotting. So again, attempting to establish whether there is a linear trend or a horizontal pattern, highlighting our independent variable of time and our dependent variable of sales, inserting our time series plot, adding the trend line. And again, here we can see that it's not perfectly flat, but it never will be. That's as close to a horizontal pattern as we will most likely see. What we would say in this case is there does appear to be a horizontal pattern. Because we have the ability to check to see whether there is a difference between whether we're talking about first quarter sales or second quarter sales or third quarter sales, we can look a little deeper into this information. So again, we saw in last video, we simply start by highlighting all our information. And there are other ways to do this, but this is probably the easiest. Pasting that, and then sorting by what we're trying to establish that seasonal trend would be based upon. So in this case, we want to see if there's a seasonal trend within each quarter. So we're going to sort based on the quarters, what we're trying to see, whether there's a seasonal trend within. Hit OK. Starting our second time series, breaking down quarter by quarter. So again, only plotting our first quarter information. Again, if we're not highlighted on the chart, we don't see those extra set of chart tools. So highlighting on the chart, I want to select data. Again, should we prefer to give this a better series name than series 1? We'll call it quarter 1 or Q1. And now I can add the other 3 quarters. So Q2. Adding only the periods for quarter 2, so periods 2, 6, 10, 14, and 18. Adding all the sales associated with those periods. Similarly, we would do that for quarters 3 and for 4. So adding Q3, its independent variable of time, the dependent variable of sales, and finally, our fourth quarter, Q4. Hitting OK. Again, we can add a legend if we'd like so we can see what the different lines represent. Now here, there does appear to be a definitive separation depending on whether we're talking about certain quarters over others. If I look at the quarter 2 sales appear to clearly always be the best sales that we have throughout the year, whereas the quarter 4 sales always appear to be the worst. This is indicative of a seasonal trend. So now we do have a definitive separation depending on what quarter that we're talking about. If we remember in the last example, all 4 of our quarters were sort of overlapping. Sometimes they were up, sometimes they were down. Here we have a definitive separation depending on which quarter we're talking about, with quarter 2 always being the best, quarter 4 always being the worst, and quarters 1 and 3, their sales do fluctuate and sort of hover around each other. So for this data, we would say there appears to be a quarterly seasonal pattern in the data. And as we said, as we go further and we start wanting to forecast, we would have to choose an appropriate forecasting method when we do have a seasonal pattern in our data. One thing to remember is typically if there is a seasonal pattern along with the horizontal pattern, we usually don't refer to the horizontal pattern in our description of the time series plot. If we simply say there is a seasonal pattern in the data, it is assumed that the horizontal pattern exists there as well. So in this case, we would just say that there is a seasonal pattern in this data.